Episode 22, War in the Sprixie Kingdom. Cobal lounged on one of the Koopa battleships, his back up against one of the huge Bill Blaster turrets. He turned the shades he had stolen from Captain Soilermonte over in his hand, watching as they caught the rays from the hot sun still shining down above them. It had been one day since his first battle as a member of the Koopa troop, and he still couldn't get over it. How many times had he almost died when fighting that tank?
Cobal, are you epic or what?
Laughed his squad mate, Masco the yellow-robed shy guy, throwing down a pack of canned Chuck Cola.
Come on, have one.
He urged, ripping open the cardboard.
You deserve it. Yeah, I would have been blown up in a totally wrong way if you hadn't have beat that tank, Cobal.
The green-hued Bob-omb plotter added, leaping up and down with excitement.
Thanks, guys.
Cobal sighed, putting on the shades and cracking open one of the cans. The ice-cold Chuck Cola was significantly better than the junky stuff he had had back in Toad Town.
Huh, with you on our side, we won't even need an army.
Masco chuckled, opening a can himself and pouring it down the hole in his mask.
Yeah, where'd you learn to fight like that, Cobal?
Plotter urged. Cobal had no desire to explain his training to two Koopa troop members. While honestly he didn't think Masco or Plotter were bad people, he doubted they'd take kindly to someone trained by Luigi being a part of their squad.
Let's just say I picked up a few things,
he said, striding to the front of the battleship. He currently was on a small platform that jutted around the superstructure, mainly for maintenance of the turrets since the new battleships had no real deck compared to their Mario-era predecessors. Thankful for his new glasses, he looked over the sun-scorched rolling sands until his gaze fell on the invading army, which was still camped there. While the Morton/Bowser Jr. faction had won yesterday's battle, Roy's army had yet to be driven off. It was becoming obvious to everyone in the camp that this was going to be a whole lot more trouble than some simple sibling rivalry.
Huh, you sure did pick up some stuff.
Masco laughed.
A lot more than some stuff, actually. Like a chain chomp without a post.
Plotter added.
Shut up.
Cobal sighed, taking another sip of the Chuck Cola as he sat down on the battleship's wooden railing. Last thing he wanted was to become some big Koopa troop hero. As Cobal finished his Chuck Cola, he strode towards the door that would take him back inside the airship, only to be met by Corporal Strike, who had a stern expression as always. Behind him, Masco and Plotter instantly stiffened.
Corporal Strike,
Cobal said in a level tone, hoping he wasn't about to get in trouble for breaking the lines. What had he been supposed to do, wait for a bullet bill to smash into him? Strike looked Cobal over, as if seeing him for the first time.
Cobal,
he finally said.
You did good today.
Cobal had not known Strike for long. However, he had got the sense that the fire bro was not one to give compliments idly.
Hey, thanks.
Cobal nodded.
Captain Sheriff would want me to reprehend you.
Strike continued.
But I think I will let this slide. You saved lives today, Cobal. If you hadn't taken out that captain, that tank would have been a problem. Hey, just doing my job, Corporal.
Cobal responded. Much as he hated to be doing a job for the Empire, at least this was keeping the innocent people of the Sprixie Kingdom safe from the far harsher rule of Roy Koopa.
Keep doing it that way,
Strike said seriously.
Next time we fight, I want you to go all out. Note taken.
Cobal nodded, before walking past Strike and into the battleship. This news was quite the relief to hear. Cobal walked through the thin corridor of the battleship, the wooden floorboards squeaking underneath his feet. Small portholes in the side of the wall let in light, while still not being large enough to serve as weak points for potential attackers. He had his mind set firmly on the future. Here he was, being praised by a Koopa Troop officer, and he hadn't done a single thing to work towards freeing the Mushroom Kingdom despite his actions in Sector 2. Some revolutionary he was. Luigi had probably freed Mushroom City by now.
Hey! Cobal!
Came a shy-sounding voice next to him. Cobal turned around to see Shroomer sticking his head out of another corridor. He looked out of place in the warship, like the kind of guy who would feel much more at home around a village of mushroom-shaped houses.
Yeah, what's up, Shroomer?
Cobal asked, glancing at the red-capped toad.
I was just wondering, Cobal. Just how long is this fighting going to last?
He shuddered as he drew closer to the blue Yoshi.
A bullet bill nearly got me,
he admitted, his eyes wide and afraid.
I had only gone into Mushroom City to buy some new gas for my dad's cart. You know how hard it is to find these days. What's my family going to think if I die? Don't talk like that, pal.
Cobal smiled. He thought back to the pure, simple idea of Mario, and how it had inspired so many people in the Mushroom Kingdom to stand up against Bowser. He had to become that symbol.
I don't know about you, but I'm going to try to take out as many of those creeps as possible. I have a few skills I'd like to put to use, and, in case you've forgotten, we've got lots of weapons on our side too, like this battleship. Yeah?
Shroomer sighed heavily and walked to one of the portholes, looking over the camp. The Koopa Troop members were gathered together, reinforcing the barriers and reloading the bill blasters. Nobody knew when Roy's army would attack again.
I always hated the Koopa Empire,
Shroomer said sadly.
I still do, actually. My uncle Shroomwise died trying to fight them off, you know. But now I'm a member of their army. Some of the officers giving strike and sheriff their orders are probably the same people the squad who killed my uncle reported to.
Cobal nodded, coming to the porthole to stand next to Shroomer.
I never knew my parents,
he said regretfully, thinking about all the times in his youth he had wondered about what kind of people they were.
Toad Bert. He's the guy who raised me in their place, says my dad was a big fighter. Some kind of champion, supposedly. Then again, Toad Bert also told me he helped Mario fight against some sort of Shadow Queen, so who knows what kind of stories about him are true and which ones are his tall tales. Yeah. I think the Glitz Pit had a Yoshi champ a while before the Empire came in, although I don't really follow stuff like that,
Shroomer said, although Cobal could still tell the Toad was distracted by the thought of having to fight for his enemy. An idea came to Cobal. A terrible idea, perhaps, one that Luigi might not have approved of. But, at the same time, despite never having known him, Cobal thought that it would be the kind of thing Mario would do. He leaned in closer to Shroomer's ear.
Shroomer,
he whispered.
Huh?
The Toad asked.
Keep your voice down,
Cobal whispered sharply.
Oh. Okay.
Shroomer nodded, with a quieter voice.
Luigi's alive,
Cobal said, watching as Shroomer's eyes widened in surprise.
He's building a new resistance, and I'm part of it. We're going to work to take down the entire empire and free the Mushroom Kingdom. Nobody's going to have to live in fear again. This.
Shroomer gasped, at a loss for words.
Don't tell anyone unless I tell you to,
Cobal ordered sharply. Obviously, the loyal Koopa Troop members could hear nothing of this, but he wasn't sure if he wanted the borderline fanatical Fungin in on it, either. He had a feeling the Green Toad would have trouble keeping secrets.
See? Cobal, this is crazy, I know.
Cobal responded, turning away from Shroomer.
But it's true. All of it. Keep fighting. What we're doing is protecting the innocent people of the Sprixie Kingdom from falling under the rule of one of the harshest leaders in the Empire. Just keep a lookout, okay? Why? Yeah.
Shroomer agreed, still sounding in a state of shock. Cobal walked away, feeling satisfied without himself. Who's to say he couldn't start his own resistance, right under the Koopa Empire's nose? There was a deafening roar as the cannons fired again, sending shiny black bullet bills streaking towards the charging crowd of minions. They exploded, showing Cobal with sand and debris as he ducked to avoid another missile flying at him. Less than an hour after his conversation with Shroomer, Roy's forces had gone on the move again. Once again Cobal was in a wild, chaotic battlefield full of smoke, sand, and flame, listening to the ear-shattering booms of explosions on both sides. Cobal pushed past a pair of hammer bros in front of him and leaped into enemy lines, landing firmly on an opposing red-shelled Koopa. Putting all his might into his foot, he kicked the shell full force, sending it rocketing into the enemies behind it. No way he was going to waste any time here. Cobal heard the low rumble of a tank's treads, and he instantly leaped into the air, fluttering over the battling minions until he landed firmly on its hot metal surface. The tank fired again, shaking him and nearly making him lose his balance. Cobal climbed to the top of the tank and forced open the hatch. Inside, he could see two shy guys manning the controls, who looked up at him in surprise. Wasting no time, Cobal shot out his tongue, eating one shy guy before spitting him out into the fighting crowd, before doing the same to his companion. Once the pilots were dealt with, he leapt into the tank with a powerful stomp, crushing the controls and rending the tank unusable, being jumping back out into the fray, dealing a Koopa Troopa a satisfying punch to the side of the head. Cobal paused to take a breath and adjusted his classes, kicking away a Goomba who attempted to ram him. As far as fighting in an all-out war went, this was going pretty good. Cobal noticed, as he hurled an egg right into the head of a fire bro, that he was near the front lines, right where his army and the opposing army were clashing together. How did the different factions of the Koopa troop tell each other apart, anyway? It wasn't like they wore any uniforms. A sound like a crash of thunder came from above him, as countless bullet bills streaked down like raining meteors, smashing into the army and exploding into big balls of fire right in the middle of the crowded minions. Glancing up at the sky, Cobal saw, through a break in the sandy haze, the hull of a huge battleship, its cannons smoking. The black and pink flag of Prince Roy fluttered in the breeze.
"What was that?"
screeched a familiar voice.
"They're shooting from above us now."
It was Shroomer, who had somehow, probably to his misfortune, found his way to the front lines. His blue vest was covered in dirt and sand, and Cobal wondered if he had actually managed to win any fights.
"Shroomer!"
Cobal shouted, knocking down an unsuspecting Koopa from behind.
"It's one of their battleships. I'm going to try and take it out."
Even as he said it, Cobal realized how unrealistic that sounded. He was just one Yoshi, how could he destroy an entire warship?
"That's crazy!"
Shroomer shouted.
How? "Come with me!"
he shouted. This was a risky plan, but it was the best he had got. Somehow, he was going to have to get up on that ship.
But you're in the enemy lines!"
Shroomer exclaimed, shouting to be heard over all the explosions that were resounding around them.
"I'm a Yoshi!"
Cobal shouted.
"Do the math!"
Unsure, Shroomer leapt forward, landing firmly on Cobal's back. Turning around, Cobal leapt through the air, fluttering over the enemies and dodging a flurry of hammers from a hammer bro. He kicked his legs harder and harder, urging his body towards the nearest tank. With just inches to spare he reached it, as Shroomer dismounted. The Toad looked around in horror. There was practically a sea of enemies around them. Not wasting any time, Cobal opened the hatch and quickly disposed of the pilots in the same way he had dealt with the Shy Guys.
"Get in!"
he shouted at Shroomer.
"And make sure to empty one of the cannons." "Why?"
Shroomer asked, as he climbed down into the cockpit.
"You're going to launch me!"
Cobal cried, climbing onto the round barrel of the cannon.
"Send me right up to their battleship."
Shroomer hastily nodded in agreement, before closing the hatch of the tank. There was a low rumble underneath Cobal, indicating that the next bullet bill in line to be fired had been removed from the cannon and placed back in wherever the tanks stored the things. Taking a deep breath, Cobal climbed into the cannon. It smelled awful inside, like a mix of gas and gunpowder, and it was painfully hot and tight. Cobal heard the gears of the tank churn as the cannon pointed him straight at the battleship, which was firing again even as several bullet bills from one of the opposing ships struck it. Cobal was able to gaze at the scene for 1 second. Then the cannon fired. Cobal instantly shot forward with blinding speed. Wind was blasting at his face, threatening to blow off his shades, as the Yoshi shot into the air like a human rocket, through the haze of sand and smoke into the clear blue sky. A bullet bill narrowly missed him as he careened towards the enemy battleship, the sun glinting off the gigantic shades on the figurehead of Prince Roy. Cobal kicked out his feet, trying to stop himself from smashing into the wall. He was flying towards one of the platforms near the turrets, just like the place he had hung out with Masco and Plodder on. As Cobal neared the wooden deck, he stuck his feet out, skidding across the floor with sparks flying from his boots, as he ducked to avoid smashing his head against the turret's cannon. He finally crashed against the railing, knocking the wind out of his lungs. It wasn't exactly a smooth landing, but he was here. The turret next to him fired with such a loud sound it couldn't have been good for his ears. Cobal watched as a duo of bullet bills shot down towards the army, hundreds of feet below, streaking long trails of smoke behind him. He couldn't afford to wait any longer. Cobal turned around, gazing up to the very height of the warship's superstructure. There, at the very top of the ship, he could see the windows of what had to be the bridge. It only made sense for it to be located in the section of the ship covered by that huge dome shaped like Prince Roy's spiky shell. Cobal leapt up and began to climb the levels of the ship, jumping from bill blaster to turret. With a crash, a bullet bill from an opposing warship thudded into the hull beside him, exploding and showering Cobal with chunks of wood, which he hurriedly dodged. The ship shook as it began to take fire, rocking and threatening to send Cobal falling the long way down. Still, Cobal continued his ascent until he was level with the bridge windows. He took a deep breath. It was now or never. Cobal crashed through the windows feet first, slamming into the frightened Koopa which had been piloting the ship. The rest of the crew turned to look at him in shock, as he slowly picked himself up in the room's center, shattered glass all around him.
"What is the meaning of this?"
a green-shelled Koopa sitting in the command seat exclaimed, getting up.
"The name's Cobal."
He smirked, adjusting his glasses.
"Nice to meet ya."
He shot forward, springing from the floor towards the captain and slurping him up with his tongue to transform him into an egg. He flung the egg at a Koopa running at him, hitting the Koopa in the face and knocking him down.
"I'm calling security!"
a Shy Guy screamed from his seat.
"Not on my watch!"
Cobal shouted, eating a Goomba and hurling an egg at the Shy Guy before he could press the button. Taking a quick breather, Cobal assessed the bridge. On each side of the room, there were 4 seats, each in front of one control console and sat on by one minion. He had taken care of 2 of those 8 minions, plus the helmsman and the captain. That left 6 minions, trained for airship operation rather than full-on combat, to deal with. This was going to be easy. Cobal ran across the floor, intercepting a Koopa who had been running for the security button with an uppercut. He quickly licked the Koopa up, spitting the green shell at a shy guy who was running for the door before springing into a jump to crush another Koopa. The remaining Koopa and shy guy dashed at him. Cobal swung his fist into the shy guy's hard mask, knocking the shy guy across the room, before leaping over the Koopa, who had got into his one shell and was now rocketing towards Cobal at high speeds. The shell rebounded off the walls, giving Cobal a second of opportunity. He licked the shell up, before spitting it out the smashed window. He paused to catch his breath. Every member of the bridge crew was knocked out. Now it was time for the real dangerous part of his plan. With nerves he felt were quite uncharacteristic of him, Cobal approached the helm, which was spinning around, unchecked by its pilot. Taking a deep breath, Cobal gripped the wooden wheel in his blue hands before doing a quick assessment of the controls. The control console next to the helm, which had previously been manned by the other Koopa, had a touch screen with sliders that appeared to control the angle and altitude of the battleship. Placing his finger on the screen, Cobal dragged it slightly to the right. With a jolt, the battleship began to turn. Cobal angled it downwards, putting the entire bridge at a tilt and making all the knocked-out crew slide to the front of the room. Through the huge front windows, he could see that his ship was pointing directly at another one of Roy's warships, which was firing its cannons at a fast rate, sending more bullet bills towards the army.
Wouldn't it be a pain if I died here?
Cobal thought dryly. Then he grabbed the helm and gripped it tightly, urging the ship forward. Its rocket engines flared as it moved on a collision course with the ship before it. Cobal flicked the autopilot switch on, before leaping out of the broken window. Cobal fell from the bridge, fluttering so that he wouldn't land on any part of the battleship. This was going to be a long fall. He spread his arms and legs out as he began to fall down towards the massive armies fighting below him. Wind beat at his body as he fell further, gaining momentum. Above him, there was an almighty crash as the entire sky lit up with fire.
This is going to be a real pain,
he thought as flaming debris began to rain down around him. He angled up body upright, and began to flutter in an attempt to break his fall.
Man, if Toadbird heard about this, he'd have a heart attack.
He grinned as a dented bill blaster barely missed his head. If Luigi had to deal with this sort of stuff on a daily basis, there was a reason why he was that good.